Good evening, students. Today we're going to be doing a quick rundown of the Indian tribes of Texas. We're going to go through the four major groups, what's in common with them, what's a little bit different, and we're going to figure out how to divide these guys up. First off, we're going to start with the Nomads. Now the Nomads, the best way that I have to remember them, the Nomads, they got no home. So Nomads got no home. These guys are always roaming around trying to chase after their food, right? So the best way that I can say which one is nomadic, well, as long as you follow the food. So things like buffalo, fish, anything that's migratory, birds, if you're following that around, you're a nomad. There are two major groups of nomads. First off, you have the hunters. And the hunters have their one big prey, and we all know that bad boy. But first, let's talk about the two different kinds. First of all, we have the Apache and the Comanche. Now these guys, all the time, all they're after is the buffalo. So we're the buffalo for life. Alright, we're after those guys. So, with the buffalo, let's go ahead and draw a quick little crude buffalo up here. Alright, so this buffalo right here, you've got a couple of different things that he's going to do. He's going to offer you meat, and meat's very important for them. So that's food, any kind of food really. But that's not all that the buffalo offers. The buffalo also offers several different things to these Indians. First off, we have teepees. And these are from the hide of the buffalo. The reason that they have teepees, which are those things that look a little bit like a tent almost, where you come around and you wrap them in the buffalo hide and leave a little room up top for the smoke to get out. So the teepees, the reason that those are made out of buffalo hide is because the buffalo was everything for the hunters. But the teepees were also very quick to pack up and move away. You also would use the bones to make tools. And you all know this from the homework. You also use the dung for fuel. That's fire. I figured you guys would enjoy that one. Alright, next up we've got the fishers. Oh. So the hunters and the fishers, just all the game, their big thing is that they just got to keep swimming. So just keep swimming. The reason that I say that is because the fishermen are always chasing after those fish. There are two big tribes here. You have the Canoes and the Apaches. Canoes and the Apaches. Ridiculously difficult to spell, so if you get it wrong, don't worry. I'm pretty sure that looking at that, I can't tell if it's right or not. So next up, we want to make sure that we know their big main source of food. Oh, those are those fish. So they're chasing them around the ocean, any kind of seafood, fish, clams, anything that they can get their hands on. There are a few things that you need to know about this. Since you're following the fish, you've got to have canoes. Their canoes were pretty long. They were about 40 feet long, and they were only about 15 inches wide. These canoes were useful because they would take all of their materials from place to place about every 2 days. But in addition, they would fish from the canoes from time to time with their bow and arrow. Speaking of, we do move every 2 days. or so, give or take. The reason for that being that the Karankawa and the Atapacans would use up all the food in one particular place and then move forward to the next place to try and get more food. As a consequence, they had very small huts. So they had little huts by the ocean side that would kind of be a whole bunch of sticks put around in a dome format. And then you would have hides placed on one side, or things like seaweed, moss, anything that they could find to kind of patch up one side, whereas the other side would just be bare-boned. This was to protect against the wind coming, the very strong coastal winds coming from one way. This was really easy to pick up and move around, so that's why they are nomadic. So in both cases, you follow the food. When the buffalo move, you do too. Whenever the fish move, you do too. So just keep remembering, these guys like to move it, move it. Okay, so those are the nomads. They got no home. Next up, we're going to talk about the sedentary tribes. So the sedentary tribes, their whole thing is to just stay still. And each one of them has a different reason for doing that. They stay still. Sedentary, stay still. Nomads, no home. So with sedentaries, you got two big kinds of tribes. You've got number one, the farmers. The farmers, your two main tribes here are the Canoes and the Wichita. Okay, so with these guys, their main source of food was planting crops. They would plant them and then they would take care of them by weeding the area that they're doing it, and they also were the first ones to use this thing called crop rotation. So make sure you think about how we were rotating out crops. You have one crop in 3 fields, and then the third field is bare or uses a crop that replenishes the nutrients. So with these crops, there's a couple of different things that we can remember that they're sedentary. First of all, it takes a long time to grow. Because it takes a long time to grow, and because you have to tend the crops as well, by weeding and watering, because of both of these things, you end up having to stay around those crops, because if you moved, you would lose your harvest. And finally, you want to make sure that you know that we have corn was one of the big ones for them. But they also did make other things. Corn was the big one, though. So other than the farmers, in the sedentary style, you do have the gatherers. And for any parents watching along with your children, yes, your children are laughing for a reason. And it's a silly one, but they do remember them. So the gatherers, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say that their motto is the 5-second rule, because they will eat whatever they can. There's a reason they're called gatherers. They'll eat things like lizards, they'll eat things, just anything that they can find. Whereas the farmers, they like to plant their crops, and just like they like to plant their lives. Gatherers, two main tribes here. You're going to have the Tonkawas and the Coelitekans. Okay, the Tonkawans and the Coelitekans, they're going to basically eat, and there's a reason I'm going to do this, they're going to eat, we're not really sure. Because they'll find a lizard sometimes, they'll eat that. They used to eat dirt whenever they had nothing else to do, and they had this fun thing that we'll talk about in just a second. But they will eat whatever they can find. Now this does include things like nuts, berries, honey, small animals, but that's why they kind of stayed near the rivers, because resources tend to be a lot thicker around water. But this is why the kids remember it, because they had this thing called the second harvest. And that's how you can tell that these guys really did just eat whatever they could get their hands on, because the second harvest was something where they would sift through, when they were finished with a meal, they would sift through the remains, re-boil them, re-wash them, and eat them again. So the gatherers would do whatever they could to survive. Another interesting fact, they took 2 months to mourn. So whenever they had a family member or a loved one die, they would mourn for 2 months inside their teepee. So that was one of the things that the kids also really found interesting about this tribe. So the easiest way to split them in half is to remember that the nomads have no homes and the sedentaries stay still. They're like cement. Your hunters and fishers, they follow the food, and their food likes to move it. So you want to make sure to follow it. And if you want to remember which ones are the move it, just remember that the buffalo are like cows. They like to move it. On the other hand, you've got the farmers and the gatherers who like to stay planted down. The farmers like to plant their crops just like they like to plant their lives. The gatherers will do whatever they can to eat, and they find it easier to stay around rivers, so they lived a mostly sedentary lifestyle. If you have any questions, please don't be afraid to contact me. I'll leave these up for a few moments so that you can copy them down and check your notes. If you need to pause, by all means. I will see all of you very shortly, and I hope you guys have a fantastic afternoon.